and welcome to the third episode of Surprisingly Even podcast. My name is Judit, and this podcast is about knitting, which is my hobby and absolutely favorite thing to do. I live in Toronto, Canada, and can be found on Ravelry as JuditNJulia. I would like to thank my returning viewers. I'm really grateful for your continued support, and thank you for joining me once again. And if you're a new viewer, welcome to my knitting world, and please make yourself comfortable. Last time we spoke, or rather I spoke to you through the camera, I was contemplating about changing the frequency of the podcast from bi-weekly to weekly. So the verdict is in. Weekly it is, at least on a trial basis. And here I am recording another episode only 1 week later for your viewing pleasure. The change in frequency will mean that I will have less, so to speak, product to show you, because I won't be able to finish and produce as much in 1 week as I would in 2. On the other hand, you will get a better view of the progression with more frequent status update. There will be less product, more process, and twice as much fun for everyone. This weekend, once again, I'm recording at the cottage, as you notice from the backdrop and surroundings. Canadian summers are short. We're trying to take advantage of every weekend that it doesn't rain, because the weather hasn't been that great this summer. So you may hear background noises like dog barking, boats on the lake. Apologies for that in advance, so please bear with me. And now, since we have no admin stuff to deal with, let's dive into the subject matter of this podcast and my favorite thing to talk about, which is knitting. And we will start with garments. So in the garments department, we have no finished object this week. I'm still working on Rhea cardigan by Pam Allen, which I'm knitting out of Kestrel. And this is organic linen yarn from Quince & Co. I did make a considerable progress on it. Last time we spoke, I was almost done with the body, almost at the point where it would be time to split for the sleeves. So I was somewhere about here. This is the body. It's knit bottom up. And I should really start using proper progress markers like all serious podcasters do. Since then, I did finish the increases that are required prior to splitting. And I did split body into panels and finished the back panel. So here is the back panel, and it's now on the scrap yarn because I assume there will be finishing going on there. And I'm already halfway through one of the front panels, which is the left side. So as you can see, things are moving along quite happily. The pattern is really pretty straightforward. It is knit from bottom up. I'm personally more used to and prefer knitting my sweaters and cardigans top down. That way I get to try them on as I go and make necessary adjustments to the fit, as I frequently do. This one is bottom up. I'm not quite sure how it's gonna fit exactly at this point, even though I did swatch, I got gauge, or my gauge was a bit tighter, so I adjusted the stitch count. So, but again, at this point, it looks like this may be somewhat on the big side, so I may be in for a surprise. Not sure, we'll see. Don't quite know how it would fit. Regardless, even if it's big, that may be the case. There's a frog in it, and reknitting this at this point is not an option. So I'm going to finish it as is, hoping for the best. And then if I really love the finished object and fit is the only issue, I would rather make myself another one, maybe in a different color, even though I quite like this one, and find this one a nice home with someone who perhaps prefers a roomier fit. As I'm getting close to finish it, I quite hope this will be finished object next time we talk, because there's not much left to do. So as I'm getting closer to finishing it, I'm quite finally getting used to working with this yarn. I still find it rather rough, but it does create quite an interesting fabric. So as you can see, it's this heavy drapey kind of fabric it's also airy at the same time because of how the yarn is constructed. So I do feel it's quite unique. So While the yarn may be rough to work with, it definitely has its redeeming qualities. The finished object could be quite interesting in look and feel. So looking forward to seeing how it's going to transform with wash and wear. I believe I do have enough yarn to finish it, so that shouldn't be a problem. I thought I may be running short, but then I found another ball that kind of escaped from the rest, so I think I'll be good on that front. So hopefully next time we speak, this will be a finished object. I already know what I'm going to knit next. The next garment I'm going to put on my needles right after I cast off this one. You have seen this yarn that I'm going to use next. I had shown it to you before. It's Yak Singles by the Wool Barn, and this is how it looks like. And I had contemplated making this pattern out of it. This was my original my original idea for this yarn, but then I had my doubts after I swatched. I arrived to the conclusion that it's not going to be this one. I will still make this one, but with another yarn. I do have a new plan for this one. It will be Lattice or Braid pullover. That's the name of the pattern, and the designer is Ririko. I like the shape of it. I think it has enough added visual interest in the form of these cabled or lacy kind of panels on the shoulders, because this yarn, it does feel quite luxurious, but visually it may seem quite plain. So I think the pattern needs to have some texture to it, or some visual interest to compensate by maybe perceived plainness of this. And coincidentally, the gauge of my swatch matched perfectly the gauge requirement in the Lattice or Braid pattern, so I think that's just a sign from the universe that it's meant to be. So I already have a plan for this, and I'm really happy about it, because as a finish an object, be that garment or scarf or hat, what keeps me going and motivated towards the end of the process is the thoughts of what I'm going to work on next. And if I don't have a specific plan in mind, it makes me kind of anxious. So now I do. All is good in the universe. This is definitely going to happen. So hopefully next time we talk, the Rhea cardigan will be finished, and this one will be on my needles. So this is it in the garments department, and next we are going to talk about shawls. But before we start talking about shawls, I wanted to briefly mention this cardigan that I'm wearing. I made this a while ago, and I still really like it and reach for it quite frequently. So pattern is called NK, and the designer is Kristen Johnston. I made this out of Malabrigo sock yarn, I believe, and I can't recall the needle number that I used, because I wasn't as religious about recording my projects in Ravelry at the time, unfortunately. This yarn was saved from another sweater I had made that didn't fit so well, so I frogged that one and used the yarn for this cardigan. I quite like it because I have a lot of sleeveless dresses, so I have a need for such open cardigan that I can throw on that are cropped, let me showcase the dress, and at the same time make sure that my hands stay warm if I want coverage. It has quite an interesting detail in the back. I will try to show it to you now, where you can see it. So there's this opening in the back that's gathered with the ribbon. There's this tie going on here, which I find quite interesting, and the overall fit is very comfortable. I'm quite pleased with the results. So if you're on the lookout for something like this, I can definitely recommend the pattern. As far as I can recall, I didn't need to make any changes to it. The fit was right the way it's written, so maybe I'll make another one. We'll see. Let's move on to the shawls department. So let's talk about the shawl situation. Same as last time, I'm still working on the Time Trade shawl by Caitlin Hunter, and I'm using the kit that was curated by the designer and that I purchased from the Knotty Lamb online shop. Last time we spoke, I was somewhere about here, about to finish the gradient section of the shawl, and since then I made quite a bit of progress. So finished with the gradients, started knitting with the variegated yarns, and here the two colors that were included in the kit, and I'm here now. So I would say I'm about 75% done. I'm really pleased with how this is coming up. The colors were matched quite well, so I really like how the gradient scent is working from very dark to light, and these two variegated colors work together really, really well as well. So really happy with how this is coming up. What can I say about the pattern? The pattern is a combination of garter stitch, feather and fan-like lace portion, which is quite popular, and quite a few of prominent shawl designers have been using this combination in the latest designs. I really like it because, you know, feather and fan is feminine, and garter represents this kind of modern kind of take on texture, so I think the two complement each other quite well. The design for this particular, it tends to be a bit repetitive, so once you get into it, it's kind of more of the same. So I'll definitely need a palette cleanser with my next project, because my other option was to make another one of these. As you may recall, I'm fortunate to have two kits for this design. So this one will be for my daughter, and the other one will be actually for myself. So one thing I'm not looking forward is to weaving all these ends, which is the byproduct of this stripiness. So the next shawl will probably be one color, just to take a break from that. I wanted to talk about the yarn a bit. As I mentioned, this was a kit curated by the designer, so I had to take it as it was put together. These two variegated yarns, they're not only different strand construction. This one is plied, and this color is single. I realized that they're also different fibers. So this one is BFL, and the other one is Merino, which is a bit of an interesting experiment for myself, because this is the first time I'm combining such different fibers and yarns in one project, so we'll see how this goes. I could definitely tell the difference between Merino and BFL, because, you know, like Merino is buttery soft and BFL has a more, I don't want to say rough because it's not, more like serious feel to it. I'm actually quite curious to see how it all is going to come together in the finished object, but I can see why these two yarns were put together in the kit, because the colors complement each other quite well, and I really like how they look next to each other. So we'll have to wait and see. So as I mentioned, about 75% done, hoping this will be a finished object next time we speak, and I already have a plan for my next shawl, which, as I mentioned, will be a one color shawl that I will be making from the yarn that I dyed myself, and I showed it to you last time. So me and my friend Vanessa, we took a yarn dyeing class at the Units shop in Toronto on Bloor West, and this was one of the colors that I produced. It's not quite as intense and saturated as I had hoped. I was hoping for more like this kind of color that you can see right at the very tip here, but this is what I got, and this is what I'm going to work with. The pattern that I'm going to knit is called Mucha. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. It's M-U-C-H-A. The designer is Leila Raabe. This pattern was part of the Quince & Co. Shawls collection for 2017. I'm not quite sure in terms of yardage how much I have here. I have two of these skeins, by the way. I think I should be fine. Anyway, I'm gonna use both of them and knit as far as they allow me. But from what I saw on the project's page for this pattern, I think it should be fine. It's not a very big shawl, and it has all sorts of different texture, which I think will showcase this color quite well. So looking forward to starting that, but first I need to finish this one. So yeah, this is the situation with the shawls. Next we're going to talk about hats. We do have a finished object in hats. So we are in the hats department now, and I'm happy to report that we have a finished object. And here it is. So this is the flame hat pattern by Irina Dmitrieva. And I made this out of Cumbria by the Fiber Company. So quite happy with the result. Let me show you how it fits at the risk of messing up my hair. But It's exactly what I was hoping for, this kind of slouchy / beret type look. The pattern is beautiful. At the same time, it's not that tricky. If you're looking for a relatively uncomplicated cabling hat, this might be it. Because it's not like intense cabling every single row. There are breaks in the cabling action, so to speak. So if you're looking for gateway into this kind of project, this might be the pattern for you. And I really like how it all comes together. And the crown, usually the crowns of cabled and color work hats are my favorite part, when things kind of magically come together and form a beautiful flower or a star or a snowflake. So well, I'm not sure there's math and logic involved in the design, but to me it's like magic, right? Excellent pattern, highly recommended. Check it out. Let me just mention the yarn briefly. I already raved about it last time we spoke. So this is Cambria by the Fiber Company. And I really liked working with it. One of the reasons this hat came together so fast, as you may recall, a week ago it was just a ribbing, and now it's like a hat. So one reason I was able to finish it so fast is that I really liked working with this yarn and looking forward working with it in the future. So as you may recall, the reason I picked it up for a smaller object is that this was my trial for potentially using it for a bigger cardigan. So that may or may not happen, but we'll be definitely using it in the future for accessories. We'll see how it holds up in the wash. Actually, I washed this hat and blocked it, and it's fine. So it didn't lose any of its luster and still feels quite soft and even luxurious, because it does have 10% my hair, and really adds to the quality of this yarn. Like any yarn that the Fiber Company makes, it's another favorite. Highly recommended. My future plan for a hat that I was going to cast on this weekend, but forgot the yarn at home, so it's not going to be happening. But I was going to use up one of the leftover yarns from my Fade Sweater, which is sock yarn by Hedgecock Fibers, and the color is Crybaby. So I don't have the ball here with me. I have the sweater, so I can show you the color. So this is very top color. I think it will make a really fun hat. So that is going to be happening. And I already have a pattern in mind. I will be using Brooklyn Tweed pattern that I'm going to use is called Altair Hat by Jared Flood. I had already made one of these. The pattern itself, it's a 2-color hat. It's calling for some a little bit of stranded color work. In this case, I'm going to make it just out of 1 color. I quite like the shape of it, how the crown is looking. So that's going to be my go-to pattern for now for any sock weight or fingered weight plain type of hat. So something to look forward to. Hopefully next time we talk, we'll have started it or finished it. We'll see how the week goes. And this kind of actually is taking us to the mittens department, because I'm using the leftovers of Cambria. Actually, not leftovers. I intentionally bought 2 skeins of it to make a hat and a pair of knitters. A hat and a pair of mittens for my mother. So this is what I have left from the first skein, and I have already started. This is where I am with the mitten, the first mitten that I started. And the pattern I'm using is called Sidan Ma Mittens. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it right. By Henna Levaniemi. And this is a free pattern on Ravelry, and I quite like the design on it. It's also cabling, so I think it will go quite well together with the hat. It has an interesting way of constructing the gusset, so looking forward to trying that. So I'm now at the point when I started gusset increases, and this is the first mitten. Let's see how much progress I'll be making on it. I really want to finish these before September. Not sure how realistic that, yeah. And the reason being is that in September 1st, the next pattern in Skein Selbo Mittens Club is supposed to drop. And I wanted to cast it on right away, but then as my self-imposed one of each rule dictates, I need to finish these ones because I cannot have 2 pairs of mittens on my needles at the same time. Hoping to finish these ones ASAP so that I can start the next Selbo mitten pattern, for which I already have the yarn ready and waiting. As soon as it drops in my inbox, we'll see how that transpires. And actually it fits quite well. So, yeah, feels really, really good. So we are done with hats and mittens, and next we are going to talk about socks. So let's survey the sock situation. Still working on the Mercury socks, and that's a free pattern on Ravelry by Kim McKenzie. Quite popular. A lot of people have either knit them or knitting them right now. This is the progress, like this is where I was last time we spoke. This is the progress I have been able to make, which may not look like a lot, but then look, they have heels now. So I'm definitely getting extra productivity performance points for finishing the heels. And from now on, things are going much quicker, just because, you know, it's only pattern on the front, the stockinette on the sole of the foot, and should be done in no time. Like, no, should be done by next time we talk in a week. As I mentioned before, I don't quite know what this yarn is. Got it at Toronto's Knitters Frolic this spring. Really, really like the color. And I think this Mercury sock pattern, one of the reasons it's so popular, that it's perfect for showcasing variegated yarns. So introduces just enough texture to show off the yarn without creating a lot of destruction. I really quite like it. I'm sure I'll be making them again. The change I made to the pattern, obviously, as you may have gleaned from looking at the heel, that this is a fish lips kiss heel, as opposed to the more traditional flap and gasset heel that's prescribed in the pattern. So I'm shorter heels are my preference, so this is what I did. This was my first time actually ever knitting socks with contrasting cuffs, heels, and the toes will also have be made out of this contrasting color. So I was kind of winging it. I feared that this fish lips kiss heel, those of you who have used this pattern, you know that it comes out kind of visually small, even though it fits quite well. It looks quite small, so I was afraid that it just wouldn't look right, that the heel would be too small in proportion to the sock, and especially attracting the attention to its size because there's such high contrast in the colors. But I think it's actually fine. It doesn't look like it's too small. So anyway, quite happy with how these are coming along. My daughter already said she's taking them. I guess we'll see about that. Hoping to finish it soon, and as I mentioned, my next cast on in socks department will be the Hermione Everyday Socks, which I'm not sure whether I'm gonna do bottom up or top down. I have to see the pattern, what's kind of it's calling for, but I already have the yarn for that, and it's waiting for these to be finished. So we are now in the treasure department, and as I mentioned before, July was my birthday month, so I did get quite trigger happy with ordering yarn. Other knitting related stuff may have gotten carried away, but now the packages started to arrive, and I'm really, really excited to share my treasure with you. So this week I have a couple of additions to my stash and also one to my knitting needle menu. So let's start. The first batch of arrivals I want to talk about is from Skein. This is an indie yarn dyer which is quite known in the knitting community. They're based in Australia, which is why it takes a while until the order arrives to Canada, because it's literally on the other side of the world. When I order from Skein, I never order for something I want to start right away, because I know I need to be patient with, and because it may take quite a while. So I ordered a few different colorways from them, and with specific pattern in mind, which is the Sunset Highway Pullover by Caitlin Hunter. It's fairly recently published pattern. It's gaining quite a following. A lot of people are making it. I also fell under its spell because it kind of opened my mind to the possibility of doing color work with speckled yarn, and I was really totally smitten by how it looked in the pictures. And I think it took me literally 5 seconds to press the buy option after I saw the pattern. So now I'm looking for the perfect combination to make that pullover with. So the yarns I ordered for that Sunset Highway, which may or may not end up to be Sunset Highway, but anyway, so here it is. The first color is Whisper. I have 2 skeins of this because the plan is for this to be the main color of the pattern, which is the bulk of the body. The pattern calls for 3 other colors, one of which is supposed to be darker to do this design at the yoke of the sweater, and there are 2 more colors that kind of also do the color work thing here and on the sleeves as well. So the other 2 colors that I have are Dandelion and Cosmic Dust. Now when they arrived, they look kind of very similar, which I found to be quite surprising, because in the picture when I ordered that, and it makes it so hard to order online, but Dandelion is supposed to be quite a bit more yellow. And this was supposed to, actually, I think this is the way it's supposed to be in the picture. So I quite like Cosmic Dust, actually. And then the 4th color that arrived is Early Morning Mist. And it's a beautiful, beautiful mix of kind of bluish gray with speckles of dark brown and some fuchsia burgundy going on here. Now this may have to be put aside. I'm guessing that the reason I ordered this because it must have looked quite much more darker in the picture, because I must have the design was that this would be the dark design in the yoke, and these 2 would be the contrasting colors, and this would be the body. I may have to rethink that, and I have already ordered more colors with my changed vision in mind. But if I had to make the Sunset Highway pullover with these yarns, what I would do, this would still be the main color. Then instead of using 2 contrasting colors, I would opt out for using 1, just because will be so much going on in this weather that I think that would provide enough visual interest. So this would be the contrasting color. And for the color of the dark of the yoke, I would use something else that's been in my stash for a while now, and it's this color, this yarn by Malabrigo, and this is Malabrigo Mechita, and the color is Plomo. So this is one possibility. I will wait until the rest of the colors that I ordered from Skein will have arrived, and then we'll make the final verdict, and you will hear more about what it will end up being, as I will be making this pullover, like, for sure, at least one of them, because I'm loving seeing all the finished objects. It's just beautiful, beautiful pattern. And yeah, so Skein. Another addition to my stash is from Baron Wool. I've used Baron Wool before. I made a shawl and socks, and I quite like the yarn. So when an email notification came that Vicky is about to hold one of a bear clubs, when she sends like a surprise color, I just click subscribe right away, and this is what I got. So this is one of a bear colors, and it's just, looking at this makes me extremely happy. This is like cotton candy with sprinkles, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if I have the heart to make it into socks. This may them be in socks, but one other possibility would be to brioche it with some like gray, or even with something like this. Look, this would be a gorgeous 2-color brioche shawl. And I'll actually have more of this, so that actually this is what I may be doing. So this is one possibility. And of course I couldn't just order one skein from Vicky, so this is the other one that I got, and this is called Riverbank. And this will probably end up being socks, even though it's so beautiful. Like, just look how gorgeous it is. And it's like red and green and brown, and I'm not sure where it's called Riverbank, but that's probably how riverbanks look like where Vicky lives. And we'll be actually quite curious to see the riverbank that inspired this colorway. Anyway, this is like totally awesome. One thing I have to say about Baron Wool sock yarn, that I find it to be a very springy, and I think it's a bit thicker than most other sock yarns I worked with. especially if you look at something like hedgehog fiber sock, which is like way thinner than this one. And I really like working with it. It's holding color like really, really good. One of my favorite shawls was made out of Baron wool. So yeah. So these are the additions to my yarn stores department. And as I mentioned before, I've also added a couple of knitting needles to my menu. I mentioned before I talked about a possibility of adding wooden needles to my assortment, because I tend to knit almost exclusively with metal needles. I have signatures and addies and knit picks. Like, I do not discriminate. I have Chowgos, so pretty much and Haya Sharps is another one. Another brand I tried recently. So. But mostly exclusively metal. I did try knitting with the wooden needles once or twice before. Didn't quite enjoy it because I found them to be quite a bit more sticky than metal, and I have no patience for when the yarn just doesn't just glide along and I have to nudge it. So that kind of slows me down. That's why I prefer metal needles for how slick they are. But then I heard quite a few podcasters mentioning these in their recent episodes, and this is Licky. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I know Ellie, this from Skein-Deer podcast, she actually mentioned specifically that these, I think she said Licky. This is how they're supposed to be pronounced. And it's their Driftwood needle series. So as soon as I heard, and at the same time I was knitting on the vignette shawl, as you may recall, with signatures. And the yarn I was using for the vignette shawl is Lunar from Shibui Knits. Was quite slippery because it has silk in it, and I just found it to be quite intense in terms of having to watch out not to lose the stitches all the time. So then Kristen from Wool and Wine mentioned that she tried these and she found these to be extremely slick and how should you call it, seamless in terms of the joint. I was surprised to hear actually in that episode she mentioned that these were slicker and smoother than the metal needles she was using on that particular object that she was working with. So she preferred the feel of these, and I decided to give them a try as well. So I went on Amazon and I ordered 2 sizes. One is, and this is 3.25 millimeters, and this is 3 millimeters. I will be trying them out, will be test driving them with the new hat that I'll be making out of hedgehog fiber sock yarn, because that's the size that, this is the size that I used. The 3 millimeter size is the size that I used for the sweater that I made with that yarn, and that gave me the gauge that I'm happy with. So I will report to you next time on how this is going. But if and I really hope that I will like them, because I like the feel of the wooden needles. It's just not quite as cold and unforgiving as metal can be sometimes. So I do like the feel of them and the idea of them. It's just that the process of knitting with them I would never found pleasurable, but I will see how these ones go. And if I like these ones, I will definitely order more. Having said that, I probably wouldn't go for the interchangeable set, because my personal preference is fixed circular needles, just because this is, I always have problems with interchangeable kind of joints, and the only interchangeable needles I have is signatures, and the only reason for that is that they don't make the fixed needles anymore in the most popular sizes. So I'm going with interchangeables there, but I just don't find the benefit of being able to switch the cable worth the fiddling with the joints. So my preference is fixed. So if I like working with these, I'll order more fixed circulars in 40-inch kind of length, because this length I found to be most versatile. I can make almost anything on 40-inch. So yeah, this is the update on the treasure needles department. So in conclusion, I believe I've covered everything I wanted to talk about today. It feels like I've been talking for a long time, even though it's only been a week since I recorded the last episode. So you wouldn't think there would be that much to talk about just yet, but clearly have a lot to say about when it comes to knitting. So I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I'm enjoying making it. So happy knitting, and I will talk to you again in a week. And just as I thought it was finished, there's one more thing I wanted to mention, if you will, an event in my knitting life. I've recently taken on teaching someone else to knit, and that's my friend Daniela, and she will be producing Her first project, after swatching and trying on various techniques, she will be producing a hat with one of my leftover yarns from the exploration station shawl. So no pressure, Daniela, you'll be fine, I promise. She is a former PhD student. She is currently a proper PhD, obviously very intelligent young lady. And now that's officially the end of the episode. Happy knitting, and we'll talk to you in a week.